Today we're going to talk about productivity, something we all need to do a better job of. Certainly moving out of the corporate realm and being on your own leads you to have a lot of challenges in accomplishing things. Our speaker today is Kathy Sexton. She is an author, speaker, trainer, and productivity strategist and coach. She has been a productivity strategist since 2003. She owns and operates the Productivity Experts, offering organizational and productive skills training to individuals, businesses, leaders, and work groups. Whether seeking to improve their work environment by growing their business, advancing their career, spending more time with family and friends, or just to reduce their daily pressures, the Productivity Expert clients increase their productivity to ignite their performance, allowing them to accomplish more with less effort, less stress, saving them time, money, and energy. Kathy uses her passion and empathetic nature to help people live healthy, productive lives. She knows the health risks of being a workaholic. She has lived it. Her purpose in life is to provide coaching, teaching, and tools to people who are hungry to spend more time with family, enjoy their careers, and live a less stressed and more carefree life. Kathy is the co-author of Focus, Organization, and Productivity, Exploring Productivity, 7 Points of Impact. She is currently working on 2 more books. Despite her constant experimentation with new technologies, Kathy's favorite productivity tools continue to be the mechanical pencil and the poly file folders, and is grateful to whoever invented luggage on wheels. Please welcome Kathy Sexton.
And I'm on? Okay. Welcome. And I would like to just kind of thank you for all being here. Sorry for the reason why you're here, but hopefully I can give you a little bit today. Today we're going to talk about just some of the tips and techniques that maybe you can be a little bit more successful in maybe finding a job, working in the time that you have currently, just maybe at home, or if you're thinking about starting your own business. So we're going to talk about mindset. We're going to talk about the rules of time and task management. We're going to talk about some clutter issues. For some of us, that's not a problem. Others, it's a bigger problem. And then we're going to talk about some email best practices today. So feel free to ask questions as we go. And we're going to, as I've already been asked about this morning, we're taking a math test. Is everybody ready? That'll be a little bit later. So, not everybody gets a second chance. And, but I do want to kind of tell you about mine. And I feel like I'm very lucky. In 1998, December 6th, I was rushed to the hospital with heart palpitations. In the hospital, not knowing, my blood pressure was sky high and not knowing what was going on. So I was there for a week test to come find out that we can't find anything, but we're going to put you on a heart monitor. So for the next 30 days, I lived on a heart monitor, and realizing had another issue, the doctor called me in, and she looked at all the results, and she said, "It's all stress. What's going on in your life?" So I told her. I immediately quit my job. I go home and tell my husband what's going on, and I'll quit on Monday. And he goes, "No, you won't. You'll quit right now." And of course, I quit right now. And learn that life can really, and our work can really take a lot out of us. Found another job, was awesome, and then once again, I proceeded to work more and more, try to get more and more done, kind of got to be the hamster on the wheel, and found myself being diagnosed with a life-threatening disease. So when I didn't respond the first time, I definitely responded the second time. So at that point, I knew I had to learn to work differently. I had to be more in tune to what was going on for me, and and a lot of times we tend to work and thinking the harder we work, the harder we can, the more we can get done. But really, in effect, that's not true. So today, hopefully, I can share some tips with you that will help you maybe let go of some of that if you are in that same realm as I am. So, you know, today we're going to talk about maximizing your most precious resources, which is time. And first off, we're going to do a little brain dump. So you have some large index cards on the table in front of you. And we have some extras here, I think, for the people in the back. And if you have paper, you can do it too. So I basically want, grab some of these. I basically want everybody just to take a couple minutes and just everything that's in your head, I need to do, want to do, someday will do, have to do, must do, get it out of your head and on that piece of paper. Okay, it looks like a lot of you are done. So basically the whole purpose, and we'll come back, hopefully if we have time, we'll come back and talk about this list a little bit more, and you know, not to have to put you to work right away. But the biggest thing that the whole reason why I wanted you to do that is I wanted you to take all those things that are going around in your head right now, and I wanted you to get them out of your head on a piece of paper. Because more times or not, we have so many things and thoughts and ideas going on in our head that it's really hard to take in more. So by not worrying about it, it's on a piece of paper. You can pick up that piece of paper when you get ready to leave. You can take it with you. So hopefully your mind's a little bit more open to accept some new knowledge today. So, you know, the bad news is that time flies. The good news is that you're the pilot. You know, we are the ones that have the control. We are the ones that can do what we want, and it's, you know, they call it time management. I really kind of feel like it's more about time, you know, just using our time a lot more effectively. So I guess it is kind of management, but, you know, we all have the same amount of time. We all have, you know, 86,400, you know, minutes in a day. You know, it's really, we all have the same amount. So it's really how we use it, what we do with it, that really makes a difference. So does anybody want to know what the greatest productivity tool is? Anybody want to share their thoughts? And we've got a microphone. We've got up here to this table up here.
I believe it would be paper and pen.
Paper and pen, okay. Does anybody else have an idea? Back here, a couple, looks like. Pardon? A deadlock. Okay. Setting goals. Okay. Does anybody else want to take a? Those are all great things, and they all really help us in a lot of ways. Yes, back there. Right, getting your thoughts and your ideas and your mind and getting focused. And you're definitely right. You know, our mind is so powerful. You know, it can help us and it can destroy us in many ways. Our mind, there is only 10%. If you think of an iceberg, and you know, only 10 to 20, 15% of that iceberg we can see above water. The biggest portion of that iceberg is underwater. It's our subconscious. So even though, you know, we think all the things we think about and stuff, we have our subconscious mind that's also working for us. And it can be working for us or it can be working against us. You know, so we really want to make sure that the majority of it's working for us. So it really is a lot about giving your mind a roadmap of where you want to go. Our mind does not know the difference between right or wrong, good or bad. It only knows what we tell it. So when we tell it things that are and I know you've all heard of positive, you know, and reinforcement and all that, and so much of it is true, but when we tell ourselves something, our mind wants to go looking at how can we, you know, make that happen. So it really is about trying to be the positive thoughts, thinking about the best way, thinking about, even though we might be in a negative situation, what is good about it can really make a big difference. But our mind can help us create so much, and it can also then destroy us in many ways, where, and in my case, I kept on telling myself, you got to work harder, you got to work harder, you got to work harder. You're not, you just have to work more hours, you have to do whatever it takes. And I allowed myself to believe that. And until I realized that it was totally wrong, out of force, but really our minds can help us in so many ways, which we'll talk a little bit more as we go through this. So we definitely have the control. And we really have, you've probably heard before, we have control over 3 things. And I really think there's 4 things we have control over. We have control over our attitude. We have control about how we feel and react to things. I mean, our feelings are what they are, but how we take those feelings and react is huge. And then we have control over our time, we have control over our money, and we have control over our energy. And those are about the only things in life that we really have control over. And each one of these feeds into the other one. So if we have more time, that gives us, we can have more energy, we can possibly make more money. If we have more money, we can hire out things, get more energy, to get more time. So it really is a whole vicious circle. But when you think about when you're in a situation when you can't control some things, think about those things that you can control and what you can take a part of. A lot of it is about giving yourself permission. Okay, I just came from a 4-day workshop with Noah St. John, and if you aren't familiar with his work, I would kind of recommend that you might want to look into it. But just got finished going through his program, being certified in his stuff, but he is everybody, how many have heard about affirmations before, okay? Quite a few of you. Okay, and for the biggest part of us, for some of us, they work, right? But for the majority of us, when we tell ourselves, okay, I'm gonna have a job tomorrow, that's not gonna work, right? Or I'm rich, and then you're back in your mind, that little Sally's telling me, oh no, you're not, how stupid are you? It's not really there. So for some people, affirmations really work, but what Noah St. John talks about is affirmations, okay? And his affirmations are about giving our mind the ability to figure out the problem. And by asking our mind the question, instead of saying a statement, but why is this so easy for me to do this? Why is, things working out better? And it can be a whole realm of things. And I would challenge you to pick something that could be fairly easy and just set your mind to that and start asking yourself why. Why is my relationship so much better? Why can I communicate with whoever? Why can I spend, why am I giving myself the ability to spend more time doing whatever? But the whole thing is he said, when we ask ourselves why, it puts our mind into just trying to figure out the problem. That's what our mind does. It tries to solve things. So when we put things out there as a question, as why, it really allows us to be able to find it. Now, you have to put some action behind that, but for the most part, if I say I'm rich or I say, why am I so rich? I mean, just those two questions are totally different feeling inside me when I say those. And no, I'm not rich, by far. But, if you just say those type of things. So it really is about giving ourselves permission. It's about giving ourselves permission to do things differently than we've ever done before. We're creatures of habit. And we do thousands and thousands of habits every day, okay? But some of them are no longer working for us. And that's the time that we need to look at those and we need to change them. So a lot of times it's just giving yourself the permission to look at it differently and possibly change things. Allow yourself to have a choice. And we do have a choice. We have a choice in everything we do, even though we're in situations that, it feels like we don't have a choice. We do. We have a choice of the way we respond. We have a choice on if we do it or not. And a lot of times, we will not choose something because, because somebody else is having us do it, or we won't do it because of the consequences. But if we really think about it, we're choosing. We're choosing it not to do it because of the consequence, or we're choosing to do it because of the consequence. But we have the choice. It's not anybody else's choice but ours. We have the permission to succeed. And this is what Noah's new book is really all about, the code to succeed, to give yourself permission to succeed, and then to ask yourself why. Why are things easier for me? Why whatever it is. But I really would challenge you to try and look at that. He's got a little book that's called Little Book of Affirmations. He's got articles and videos out on the web, but it really is, I was in a situation 2 years ago that basically lost my company to no fault of my own. And I was in a situation that, I was unemployed for, 3 months of trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Do I go try and find a job? Do I start a new company? And those affirmations really helped me a lot during that period of, just trying to find out who I was and what I wanted to do. So, and now you know what I do. I went with my heart and my soul and doing what I love now. So a good question to ask yourself is, what's working? So what's working? Am I getting the things accomplished that I want to accomplish? Right now, being unemployed, looking for work, am I working the way I want to do? Am I processing the way I want? Am I doing those things at home that I said, okay, I have this extra time, I want to do these things and get this stuff done, but before you know it, time flies and we don't get those things done. So what's working for you is always a great way to look at things, especially when you're in a situation where things might not be quite working. That's the first question. What's working? Because you don't want to change the things that are working. But then what's not working? Okay? So what's not working? And that's where you want to look at what's not working and take one of those not workings and try and figure out a better way to do it. And also collaboration with other people, talking with them, asking them, what would you do? How would you, do this? I'm trying to figure out how to do that. Two minds are better than one by far, but collaboration with other people and trying to figure out, this is where I'm at, other people might have been there. One thing about, the mind is that it only can think about past history. So it comes from everything that when we think of our thoughts and our ideas and where we want to go, that comes from past history that we've had. And each one of us have different histories than the other. So that's why collaboration is so good. That's why things like this are so great, because you get to meet other people who are maybe be in the same boat, but a totally different boat than you are. But to be able to share ideas and work. So it really is about trying to figure out what's not working so that you can figure out what to do forward. Willing, as I said, to do things differently, giving yourself permission. So it's about change, and you all know about change. You're all in that mode right now of change. But sometimes we don't change what we're doing to get to where we want to go. So we're going to talk about your time to start with. So minutes are worth more than money. Spend them wisely. So our days are only, as I said earlier, we only have so many minutes, so many seconds, so many hours in every day, and we all have the same amount. And somebody who is very productive versus somebody who's not productive at all have the same amount of time. And it's what they do with that that really matters. So let's look at the lack of direction and objectives. A lot of times, so this morning, Tuesday morning, every week, you know that this is where you're going to be or somewhere else. But this morning, you got up knowing that you were going to be here, right? So you got up at a certain time knowing that you had to do traffic and you had to be here at a certain time. But a lot of times, we get up in the morning, our feet hit the floor, and we just go about our day. And if you're working or not working, it's for the majority of it, it's the same. We get up, We go through the motions of doing what we're doing without really thinking about where we're going to go today. What do we want to accomplish today? You know, this morning you knew you needed to be here, but for the majority of the days, we don't. We don't take the time the night before or the first thing that morning to think about where do I want to go today and what do I want to accomplish today. And that can be huge to change the way things happen for you. You know, we can plan. We can't plan for failure, you know, but we can plan to succeed. So it really is about putting some things in place to make things better for you, putting things some in place to be able to allow things to be maybe easier for you. So planning for tomorrow, and if you're working, not working, you have things, we all have things to do every single day. And if we take the time to plan, the night before is the best, but first thing in the morning. You know, take 10, 15 minutes. You know, if you're in the process of doing resumes or in the process of scheduling, you know, interviews or just doing networking events, plan those out. By planning, just taking a few minutes to plan can make a whole difference between what you accomplish one day versus not planning at all. 15 minutes of planning equals the opposite of 15 minutes of planning is an hour of basically unused time. So by taking 15 minutes to plan, what you're going to do, that it's going to be equal to an hour that you're going to kind of flutter around, trying to figure out where you're going, where you've been, what needs to happen. So planning is a really big portion of trying to be more productive and trying to move forward. Procrastination. Who's a procrastinator? Everybody's hands better be up. You know, we all are. We all are procrastinators to some degree, okay? We can only do what we can do. We can only really do one thing at a time, even though we might think differently. But so the whole thing about procrastination is making a choice. But a lot of times we procrastinate. It might be procrastinating on going to a networking event because that's not what we are. We're an introvert versus an extrovert. Might be that we're procrastinating on sending out more resumes because it just doesn't seem to work. But a lot of times the reasons why we procrastinate are the biggest reasons. There are a lot of reasons, but the biggest reasons are, number one, fear. Fear that we won't succeed. Fear of the unknown, fear that we don't know how to do it, fear of just not knowing what will happen. But even more powerful than the fear, which, you know, fear is very, very powerful, a lot of times it goes back to what I said earlier about the mind. We haven't given us a choice. It hasn't been a choice for us. We're doing it because we have to do it. We're doing it because somebody else needs us to do it. We're doing it for some other reason. And there's a rebellion part in all of us. And we want to tend to, you know, subconsciously rebel because somebody else wanted us to do it. It wasn't our idea. But when we say, I choose to do this, might not like it, might not really want to do it, but if I'm choosing to do it, it changes that whole mental state of I'm choosing to do this, and it'll allow you to work through that procrastination in a lot of ways. Procrastination, you know, is, as I said, is common for everybody. It's about choosing what's most important to do versus those things that are not quite as important. And a lot of times we'll choose those unimportant things just because we're trying to avoid the big ones. But where it really comes into a problem is when we allow procrastination to become a negative effect in our life. And the biggest one that I can think of, being an accountant by trade, is tax time. You know, those are those people the first of the year. I mean, you know, January 31st, February 2nd, they've got their tax returns done and in the mail, and, you know, and then there's those that, you know, will start working on it, and then those will be April 1st, they're finally starting to gather things, and the tension's starting to build, and the stress is starting to build. And then there are those people who will pass the deadline. And so when you pass a deadline, then you add a lot of more stress and a lot of penalties and expense that's unneeded. So if you are really a big procrastinator, then if it's negatively affecting your life, that's when you really want to look at it. The other thing about procrastination is that a lot of times we're going to procrastinate only because, how do I want to say this? You know, we procrastinate and I'm just even losing my thoughts here. So we'll just move on from that. I'll come back to it, I know. Identifying your prime time. This is huge because every one of us have a different level of energy at a different level at time, okay? Some of us are morning people. Some of us get a spark in the afternoon. Some of us are nighttime people. And the biggest problem with that is that the rest of our family is not. You know, that might be good, might not be bad. But identifying those prime times. So when you're at your top energy, that's the time you want to make sure you're working on those mental things. If you're putting, you know, a household budget together, if you're, you know, really concentrating on, you know, a game plan on your job search or whatever, anything that's going to take a lot of mental energy, you want to do it when you're full of energy and not when you're draining. Because we'll tend to do things. Household finances, you know, how many like to do household finances? None, probably, maybe a few. But, you know, that's something that drains us mentally. So we want to do those things when we do have more energy because it's going to take us 2, 3, 4 times as long to do it. And we're going to put it off, you know, but if we do it at our prime time and when we have more energy, it will happen a lot faster. So using the 80-20 rules, anybody heard of the 80-20 rule? Okay. So 80% of our results come from 20% of effort. And this works in so many ways. Our time is really, really valuable. So we're just going to take an 8-hour day because it's just considering it a work day. So on an 8-hour day, if you took 20% of that, that's 96 minutes. So if you took 96 minutes and just focused on those things that are most important for you to get done that day, you will find that you will accomplish more than you accomplished the whole day long. Because generally what happens, we have interruptions, we have a lot of things going on, and we don't tend to focus on anything for any long period of time. And for some people, it's a lot easier to focus on a long period of time than for others. But, you know, pretty much 90 minutes is the most anybody can do at one time, you know, effectively. So by just taking 96 minutes the first thing in the morning and spending that working on those things that you really need to get accomplished that day, you will find you will get more accomplished and you will move farther ahead of where you want to go just by taking that time. Does that make sense? Anybody have any questions about that? Yes.
No question's a stupid question, right?
Right. No, definitely, definitely.
Okay. So how many, the 96 minutes, how did you get that again?
Okay, so if you're looking at an 8-hour day, 20% is
Okay.
96 minutes. So if you can't even focus for 96 minutes, take a half hour, take an hour, and gradually accrue. But you will find it is amazing, the clients that I've worked with that have taken the time to do this, it's huge on the stuff that they get done.
And that 96 minutes, should that be our prime time or first thing for?
It's usually, for most people, it's better first thing in the morning, but if you work better at a prime time, then I would do that. But as long as it's carved out.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions about that? Does anybody use the 80-20 rule effectively in some other manner? Sales, definitely. You know, you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Focusing on the right, you know, prospects, and that definitely helps.
Yes, yes. And they say, what, 10 calls produces 10 10,
Yes.
8 no's, you get 2 yeses.
That's correct.
Yes, so it's 80-20. They say the health care, 80%, 20% of the health care is spent by 20% of the individuals. 20% of a company's revenue, 80% of somebody's company's revenue comes from 20% of their clients. So the 80-20 rule is out there in millions and millions of ways. It was basically Pareto, Italian economist, is the one that developed this, and it has just stand in time. So there's just so many things out there, sales, health, anything that you can think about, 20% of effort produces 80%. So if we can find that right 20% of where we need to do, what we need to do, what we need to be accomplishing, it will produce 80%. Any other questions about that? Having a system or a process. Okay, math time. Everybody have their math sheets? Everybody should have this sheet, and this is the side we should. Pardon? Okay. Does anybody else need a sheet? So this is the page I want you to be looking at. It's two-sided. Pardon? The one without the lines. And there's someone over, Deb, over here in this corner. Somebody else. Okay. Okay, I want everybody to find the numeral 1. And just put your pen there. And has anybody ever done this before? Okay. And at the point that I say go, I want you to circle the numeral 1, then the 2, then the 3, then the 4, and go just as far as you can until I tell you to stop, okay? Is everybody ready? Go. Stop. Okay, anybody get 10? Couple? How many did you get? 10? Anybody get more than 10? How many did you get? 15? Okay. High achiever back there? Okay. Anybody else? Okay. All right, now I want you to turn it over. And I will tell you that it's the same numbers, same position, okay? But I will also tell you that it's broken in, as you can see, into quadrants. The numeral 1 is in the first quadrant. Number 2 is in the next quadrant, and then 3, and then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, okay? So I've kind of given you a little pathway there. So I want you to find number 1 again, and start. Stop. Anybody double? Wow. Wow. Anybody do less? You did. Okay. Once in a while, it's got to be somebody, always somebody. So how many less did you do the first time than you did the first time?
3 less, 3 fewer this time.
Than you did the first time. And do you have any reason, do you think?
I think for me, it's a matter of, I was thinking too hard.
Mm-hmm.
First time I just went with the flow.
Mm-hmm. And that's definitely usually the issue.
And it created a artificialness for me that just slowed it down, I guess.
Okay, all right. So why do you think the majority of you doubled or more by the second time? A pattern? I told you where to go. A process. Yes? Confidence.
From the first time you knew where the numbers were as far as you got, so it was easy to get that first batch.
Okay.
I think because you're focusing on smaller areas.
Yeah. And all of those are true. All of those are true. And our life is basically, if we think about it, anything that we accomplish and we accomplish it well, we have a system or a process to do it. Okay? So if it's going fishing, you know, there's a process that you need to do that. If it's baking a cake, there's a process that we do that. And so when we want to do something and accomplish it well, the more we can put a process or a system in place, the better and the more we will accomplish because of it. Does that make sense? You know, because we are, and then the next key to that is you always knew where the next thing you were going to go, the next place you were going to go. So I want everybody to kind of look at their brain dump that we did earlier. And I want you to look at that and just kind of skim it. And if you see anything, I want you to kind of, you know, write maybe a T or a P, T for task, P for project, next to that list. Okay. So was there anybody that didn't have any P's? Okay. Is there anybody that had a lot of P's? Okay. What we tend to do is when we write something down that we need to do, we think about it as end result. Okay? I need to do whatever. It's the end result, majority of the time, when we're trying to do something and we're thinking about what we need to do. When instead, if we wrote down the next thing that needed to happen, or took that project and then stepped it underneath it. So for example, David Allen talks about this a lot, and I kind of like to use this analogy because everybody can relate to it. But if I need to go buy tires for my car, and I write down, buy tires for my car on my list. When I look at that, the first thought that comes to my mind, that's a half a day out of my life. Okay? So I don't have time this week to do that. But if I would write down, get prices for tires for your car, that's something when I have a small break that I can make a phone call and do. So when we can break down our projects into smaller tasks and then always think about what's the next action I need to do versus the end result, it'll allow us to break down things into smaller pieces and that we can find that more time to do them, you know, because they can fit into smaller increments of time. And when we look at something from a results-based, it's about sometimes getting very overwhelmed that I need to do whatever it is that I need to do, you know, and in my case, you know, maybe work on my website or whatever, instead of me thinking I need to gather pictures for this page or thinking about it working on one page. If I think about my website at one thing, because it's not something I'm good at or like to do, that gets overwhelming. But if I can break it down into little pieces, it makes a big difference. And so think about when you write down a project, just take a few minutes to break it down into some steps so that you have a system and that you know where the next step is you're going to go. Any questions about that, or anybody have any comments they want to share? Yes?
It occurs to me that sometimes we can overreact to having the focus on the goal. That has happened for me sometimes. Kind of with the example earlier, sometimes I do better when I don't set myself a goal. like when it comes to exercising, just go with it. The other thing that occurs to me is that having the big picture can be an asset, but it also can be a hindrance and create some of the overwhelm thing you just talked about. I can see
Right.
all of what it takes to get all of these things are going to be implicated with trying to get it done, and it makes it that much easier for me to come up with a good excuse why I don't do it at all.
Right, right. I agree. And that's definitely true. I mean, we want to look at the big picture because that's where our benefit comes from, is that big picture. So we don't want to slight that, but we also want to look at it and break it down.
Hi, it just reminds me of some advice that I give a lot to others. How do you eat an elephant?
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time, but I need to follow my own advice, so.
Yeah, yeah. It's about walking that talk, right? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, in one of the articles that I wrote in one of the books, as David mentioned earlier, I'm co-author of 3 books, and in the one chapter in one of the books, it's kind of what I wrote about was walking our talk. Because if we can't do it, how can we expect others to follow in our footsteps? So thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? Okay, so using your calendar. How many have one calendar that they use? How many have 2? How many have 3? How many have 4? No 4s? And zeros. I forgot the zeros. Okay. Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of advice. You have one life. You need one calendar. Okay? And we do have a lot of calendars. We have, and if we're working, it even adds more. But we have, our home calendar. We have maybe the Boy Scout calendar, the church calendar. We have maybe a work calendar. We have a travel calendar, whatever that might be. And the most I've ever had somebody tell me was 8. And I think I almost passed out then. But it's a matter of really understanding that for us to be effective, we need to have everything on the same calendar. Because when we don't, that's when we really tend to overbook ourselves a lot. Did you have a question?
Sometimes we have 2 calendars because we're married.
Okay.
And so, can you comment on how to make that work?
Okay. So tell me a little bit more. So you have your wife's calendar and your calendar, and how do you share them in any way, or?
Yeah, we have one big calendar, and then I have my calendar, and then I add on, this is what I'm going to go network, for example, today. And so, if you're going to plan something on Tuesday, please be respectful of that time, for example.
Right, right. Okay, well, great. I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of times I don't talk about that. Okay, well, to kind of contradict what I just said, I have a paper calendar and I have an electronic calendar, okay? And at the end of the day, they merge together because I need physical paper. I need to write it. I need to see my whole day, my whole week at a time. If I'm working with a client, I want it right there in front of me and not have to get in my little phone and figure it out. But at the end of the day, I go and then what happens then is at the end of the week, if there's any major changes, I print off the monthly calendar and it goes onto our refrigerator. So my husband lives by that, and I never realized how much he lived by that. I guess he's just grown to, in time. He used to ask me, I said, well, it's on the calendar. Tammy's going here, and I'm going here, or whatever. And now if he doesn't have his calendar up on the refrigerator, where's my calendar? I don't know what's going on. So it is okay to have separate calendars, but at the end of the day, they need to come together. And so those things need to be marked on your calendar if you're keeping a separate calendar so that you can be aware and conscious and, respectful of the other person's calendar. Does that answer your question? Okay, all right. Any other questions about calendars? The other thing about calendars is that it is really a good practice to put the things on a calendar that we want to make sure we have happen, okay? So sometimes it's taking time for ourselves. Okay? And that's usually what we don't do. We don't take the time for ourselves like we should. And so kind of my rule of thumb, if you really want it to happen, it needs to be on the calendar. So if you want to, and for some people, they don't need it. They're going to go exercise every single morning at 5 o'clock, and it's their ritual, and they're into that. For somebody who wants to start exercising, they need to have that on their calendar. It needs to be worked into their day. Okay? And then the other thing is, if you're going to work on a project an hour or more, then I think that needs to go on a calendar. Because it's so easy for us to bypass that. It's so easiest for, oh, I'll do it later. It's so easy for us to, oh, I don't have that much time now. But so when you're working on something that you feel like it's going to take you an hour or more, I think that it needs to be blocked out on the calendar. Does anybody else use time blocking on their calendar? You want to share that?
I'm a huge Stephen Covey fan, so first things first, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I even use the Franklin Covey system, but the thing that really tripped me up over the years, I became a workaholic because I would have this long list of to-do items. And by the end of the day, it would really kind of pound on my ego because I didn't get hardly any of them done. And I reread his book, First Things First, and he talks about this, about blocking out chunks of time on your calendar for tasks like this. And he talks a lot about staying in quadrant 2, which means quadrant 2 activities are exercise, recreation, working on projects, things that don't act on you that you have to act on. Quadrant 1 is more urgent, and like the phone ringing or the dog barking or the boss putting a bunch of junk on your desk that you got to deal with. But for me, that time blocking has really saved my sanity, because I think I had a really erroneous idea of how much time I really had in a day. Right. I'm like, why do I, once that aha moment came, I had this epiphany, like, I'm trying to do 50 things a day, and I don't have the time isn't there.
Right.
So yeah, I would highly recommend things like that, especially if you have a project that you're working on and want to get finished.
Right. The other thing on that same element is, it's a great way when you have, block that time out and you get interrupted or somebody else asks you something to do something, it allows you to weigh. Okay, I have this, and it's already planned. And it also gives you an out. I have a meeting. They don't need to know it's with yourself. And the thing about that is, I would say, don't stand yourself up. If you're going to take the time to put it on your calendar, honor yourself and don't stand yourself up and give that time to somebody else, unless it's really, really important. Anybody else use time? Yes.
I just have a general suggestion per the title of your slide there. If you want to make an appointment, use the calendar and not email to make that appointment. There is a calendar function associated with almost every email program that I'm aware of, and that's what its purpose is. And if someone sends you an email instead of an appointment, then go to your calendar, build the appointment, and send it back to them.
Correct.
Because if there's an issue or you've misinterpreted what they wanted, hopefully they'll catch it.
Right, and if you're using like Outlook, because I do teach Outlook, so it's one of the things that I really, really stress is, or if I'm going to make an appointment with someone, I will do that. I will send it, them the calendar event, and it automatically goes on their calendar once they accept it.
Would you like to hear the story that goes with that?
Yes, I'd love to.
April. So I bought, when I become unemployed, I bought a low-rent, not-so-smart phone. It looks like a BlackBerry, but it's not a BlackBerry.
Okay.
It's a Nokia, and if you work for Nokia, I'm sorry. What my phone does, if you send me an email and there's 4 digits in the email, the phone thinks that that's a time, and it will highlight it blue and it will underline it, which is a nice feature. However, it's not always accurate because 4 digits aren't always a time. So there was a position that I was very interested in. I was very keen on having a discussion with this networking individual, and he sent me an email, not an appointment. And it said, can you come to my office, such and such location, room 1045? And I was so ecstatic to get the message, read it on my phone, saw the 1045 underlined in blue and highlighted. Guess what time I made the appointment for on my calendar?
10:40?
10:45. And I didn't send it back to him, which I'm so sorry I didn't do. So I got all duded up with my suit and tie and showed up at 10:30, very proud of myself for being early. Stuck my head in the gentleman's office and immersed my head in a sea of negativity. I could just feel it. I could feel the negative energy. And I said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I know I'm a little early. I'll just hang out in the hall here till our appointment time at 10:45. And then I heard the words I'd never want to hear again. You're not early. You're late. And I stuttered with this reality because I really wanted this appointment. I grabbed my phone, I looked at it, and sure enough, it said, can you come to my office, 8, small a, small m, such and such a location, room 1045. I was 2 hours and 45 minutes late. I stood up my potential boss and his department head because I didn't slow down and recreate the message properly. And this is the man I'm going to go report to. So please, if you use your calendar properly, you can avoid these situations. But if someone sends you a notice, an email, carefully reconstruct it and send it back to them. Because I think it would have saved a great deal of sweat equity on my part.
Right, right. Thank you for sharing that. Yes?
I just have one general comment. I have a lot of trouble with time management. And just what I've noticed is that, and this is very general, is like maybe 50 to 60% of the world depends on 40 to 50% of the other part of the world to survive emotionally, physically, financially. So you think of yourself as a person and you have time. But if other people depend on you, and it could be 1 or it could be 20 people, that's going to interrupt your process. I mean, if you have a daughter that's sick, or, you know, any time during that day, you could have something crashing down around you. And to me, the biggest problem I see is not allocating my time during the day, but trying to figure out a way to work around those people that are dependent on you for some source of income or emotion, you know, or even physical. Like if you have someone who's even working, but they have a problem with lifting things, so you have to go help them out. So my biggest problem with all the time management, everything, who do you eliminate from that process to make yourself more efficient, and you have to do it. You might have a relative that is constantly calling you for emotional support. What do? You just keep on giving that person emotional support? You just, you know, there's sometimes I have a relative who he's functioning with a job, but there's 3 other people in his family, a daughter, a son, and a wife, and none of them can function at all in reality. So they depend on him to help him through the day, and most of his day is gone, and he doesn't even know it when he wakes up. Oh, I crashed a car. Oh, I got mad, so I left. And when I left, I'm here in Tucson, and my tire's blowing. So at one point, 30 or 40 years ago, I heard of a philosophy where a person, to make himself more efficient, was actually eliminating relationships that didn't pay off for him. He had to figure out, do I keep on giving this person emotion, or just cut them off and say, please do this on your own? It's just kind of a generic thing that overrides all this stuff, you know, in my life at least. So I have to figure out who I'm going to write off and who I'm not going to write off, just so I can get something done on my own. Does that make sense?
Oh, definitely, because I will touch on a little bit of that. I think it's in the second half. And then also the interruptions that we have in our life takes on a big part. You know, that is a lot of our life. Yes?
You know, on the other side, I feel a positive note, I've started writing down and keeping a list of my accomplishments, big or small. every day, because I would get in the feeling that, I'm not using my calendar right now, and I'm not getting anything accomplished. But once you start writing them down, you find that you are making accomplishments throughout the day.
Definitely, definitely true. I would have to agree with you. And I even have a friend who I think this is great. I loved it when she said that. She said, I've changed my to-do list to call my accomplishment list. So now, instead of looking at it, things I need to do, these are the things I've accomplished once I've gotten them done. So, a lot of times that goes back to the mindset and changing the way we think about things. And we will talk about both of those items a little bit more. Anybody else before we move on?
You said you'd talk about this in the second half, so I don't want to steal your thunder, but I did want to make a comment regarding cutting people out of your lives to be more efficient. Stephen Covey actually does a really good job of talking about that in his books, and it was a real eye-opener for me because I was trying to be efficient with people. And you can be efficient with time, but you have to be effective with people. And, I was a workaholic, but I wasn't incorporating the people that I cared about into my life, into my time. And that was just a big eye-opener for me. I mean, on the flip side, I'm also a board-certified therapist, so I know that, you can't allow a lot of people to, you can't let them suck all the life force out of you by enabling their poor choices in life either. So I think there's a real balancing act there.
Definitely, definitely. And I think it's, about thinking about when we're making a decision, who is it affecting? Is it affecting us? Is it affecting the people we love and the people that are working? So it really is not all about us. We do have to think about those other people. Yes?
I just had one comment. I'm generally good at scheduling, but I tend to run late sometimes, so that's my issue. And I think that some of the comments that have been made, that I came to realize, I always had time for everybody. So if somebody stopped by my office, do you have a minute? Yes, I have a minute. Or if you're talking to me, I didn't really want to tell you, hey, I have to be at a meeting, so, we need to stop talking. So I always, valued that person and didn't really want to cut them off. And so for me, it really boiled down to or if I came in early to do extra work, but my boss happened to be there and he wanted me to do something else, then, I might have come in at 5 o'clock to get my stuff done, but I ended up doing his stuff instead. So, but really for me, what it boiled down to was I always had time for you, but I never had time for me. And so that's one thing that I've consciously been working on as I'm going through a transition, is to really focus more on what do I need time for and prioritizing that. And, it's really about limit setting. So, whether you cut somebody out of your life or however you handle that, I think it's really about respecting yourself and setting those limits and figuring out what it is you need to get through your day. And
right.
And I try to tell people up front, hey, I can talk to you, I have 10 minutes, then I'm going to have to go. That way you set those limits up front and you tell the person, this is what I'm willing to do. I'm not going to be able to do more than that. And so it still respects the person, but it also gives, it respects yourself too.
Definitely, and thank you for sharing that, because it is about setting boundaries. And if we know that we're going to get ready to go in a meeting, or we're going to, work on something for ourselves, to give that person, I have 5 minutes, but then stick to that. Because if you don't, you teach what you allow. And if we allow everybody to always, take from us, they will always take from us. So it is about setting boundaries. Anybody else? Okay, so, and I guess, I was thinking this was afterwards, but so our to-dos or to-don'ts, okay, or not to-dos. A lot of things that we have on our list, if we really look at them, they aren't that important. They aren't things that we need to do. Or we'll get ourselves caught up into the things that we like to do. But when we are doing a to-do list, it is, the gentleman said earlier, you know, about getting it down, getting it on a piece of paper, getting it so that we can see it, so we know that what we need to do, so then we can prioritize it, because that's the key. Prioritizing what we need to do. And my standard rule is, I call it the tip of the day, the top important priorities. So I pick 3 things every morning that I want to make sure I accomplish that day. So if I put them on, you know, an index card or a Post-it note and stick it up in front of me, it allows me to refocus and to know that those things are the things that are important to me. And we'll talk a little bit about interruptions in a minute, but when you are being interrupted, or you're getting interrupted by someone else, or the phone rings or something else, you know, by having that, what happens, we get distracted, and, you know, we answer somebody's question, we answer the phone, the doorbell, whatever it is. When we come back to our desk, we tend to go off onto something different than we were working on. So if you keep those 3 things in front of you, knowing it's much easier to refocus, to come back to, and to stay focused on what you want to get done. And I would much rather get done 3 things completely and have them done, and then I don't have to worry about them again, than to get 5 or 6 things partially done that I still have to keep on my list. So, you know, you can look at it, you know, that way at least you're moving forward and you're taking things off that list, or you can look at them as your accomplishment list. And what we're talking about to do is, you know, the biggest thing that I think a lot of us do, and I know I'm as guilty as anyone else, is at the end of the day, you know, we've kind of got this day planned in our head, and at the end of the day, like you were talking about, we have all these other things that have come into our life and come and gone, and today gosh, I got nothing done today. Anybody felt that way? I'm not alone? Right. So if we take the time at the end of the day and to appreciate what we did get done, it might not have been what we planned, but if we really look at it and appreciate what we got done, it just is a whole totally different mindset than to beating ourselves up about what we didn't. So that's another reason why when we have a to-do list that has 20, 25, 30 things on it, there's no possible way we can get all that done. So why do we put that on us for the day? So if you want to have one great global list, that's great, but only have a list that might have 5 or 10 things at the most on it in a day. You can always go get that list and add something if you get all those done. But if we can just focus on, you know, the vital few that are really important, we will feel so much better at the end of the day. Plus, we will move forward faster by setting some priority to those items. So let's talk about productivity zappers, the interruptions. So, you know, there's a fine line between being interrupted and being informed. Okay? And it really is, like I said before, it's what we teach what we allow. But by allowing ourselves, we have so many things coming in at us. We have paper and items and projects. We have email coming in at us. And even though you might not be working, I'm sure everybody still gets a ton of email. You know, just the phone calls, the messages we have to answer. We've got voicemails that we have to deal with, and we have everybody else who wants us to do something. You know, so it really is about trying to find a balance, but when we have chosen, I want to accomplish three things today, when we get interrupted, we can come back to that, and we know, okay, I haven't finished this, I want to go back to that. Or when we get interrupted, we can say, I'm working on this. I said this was really important for me today. And this comes in. It's so much easier to evaluate which one. Maybe that interruption was more important than you planned. But if we haven't clearly distinguished what we want to accomplish today, urgent's always going to win. somebody else is always going to win the majority of the time. So by taking the time to prioritize, when we do get those interruptions, and from so many different things, they say we get 50 to 60 interruptions a day in a work day, I'm talking about. That's one every 7 to 8 minutes. And then we wonder why we can't get it done, you know? So it really is about setting some intention, setting some boundaries like we talked before, setting, you know, your plan. But having a plan is huge, and knowing what's important for you today. And that's just meetings. So there's the thing about urgent, not urgent, important, non-important. And we spend a lot of time in the non-urgent, non-important quadrant of our lives. You know, in the, you know, trivia, the junk mail, the, you know, some of the messages. You know, we need to be spending more time on those things that are important, but not urgent, so that we can avoid the crises, avoid the pressing issues. But if we spend more time up here in this quadrant that's not urgent, but important, preparation, our own priorities, planning, exercise, relationship. If we spend more time here, the rest of these will drop away. I mean, not that they will be eliminated, because they will not. I'm not saying that. But when we concentrate up here in this, you know, things that are not urgent but very important, the rest of these, some of these will be just taken care of for themselves. So the biggest thing is we attempt too much. And, you know, we talked about a little bit is we tend to attempt too much. So it takes 1.5 to 3 times longer to do something than what we anticipate. 1.5 to 3 times. How many times have you said, oh, that'll only take me 5 minutes, half an hour, we're still working on it? So we tend to not, you know, really think about it. So when we know what our list is, when we know what our calendar looks like, it's much easier not to overbook ourselves. And we really, in a work world, we should not be booking ourselves more than 50 to 75% of the day. We need time for interruptions because they are going to happen. If you don't plan them, they're going to happen anyway. So it's really about taking time to recharge. You need to stop, you need to take a break when things are getting a little bit overwhelming. And that's our time for our break. Okay, so I gave you a little bit of time to recharge. You know, I kind of really want to come back to this because this is really, really so important. Especially if you're working at home, you're doing things at home. Yes, before. This over here? How's that? Does that work? Oh, and I wish I would have said something before. Okay, so I really just want to re-emphasize how important it is for us to take a break, especially when we just feel like we don't have enough time. When we just, I'm not going to get all this done today, I'm just really, if you just take that few minutes, and if it's just to sit back in your chair or sit down and close your eyes for a few minutes, just to rejuvenate yourself, just for a few minutes. But they really say that we really cannot concentrate more than 90 minutes at a time without our mind starting to wander and starting to go other places. So if you are working on a big project, I would recommend that you set a timer or you know, break it up into pieces so that after 60 to 90 minutes, you're taking a break, no matter how small. But take a break, get up and walk around, take the dog for a walk, whatever that means for you. But again, like I said, just sitting back, closing your eyes, and thinking about something pleasurable can be huge. So, and when we think we don't have time for it, that's the time we need it most. Okay, so we're going to talk about getting organized and removing the clutter. Does anybody have any clutter? Okay. Okay, so there are some different types of clutter. There are mental clutter, there's social clutter, there's physical clutter, and there's digital clutter. And I'm just going to talk briefly about the mental and social, and we'll talk more about the physical and digital. You know, the mental clutter, we talked a lot about the mental this morning. But all negative thoughts, all those negative things can really clutter up our mind. Our subconscious, you know, can really take over, and I'll explain that a little bit more when we get into the physical. But there is that mental clutter, and it's a big part of it, a big part. Mental is so important for us to be aware of, and it's just not the physical. The social, the people that are in our life, could be social media. But a lot of times there are people in our lives, and I do have to say at one period in my life, I did have to disengage from a few people that were in my life, and 2 of them were my family members. So, but I had to realize that they were not giving anything to my life. They were only taking from my life and causing more problems for me. So, you know, sometimes we have those tough decisions to make, but, you know, being around people that support us gives us energy, and those people who don't take our energy. So all of these things can take energy from us, you know, the mental, social, physical, and digital. So we're going to talk about the physical. Okay, has anybody ever heard or feel out of sight, out of mind? Okay, got a few people. Okay, so I want you to think the opposite of that. Insight, in mind. Okay? When I go to set something on my desk and I say, oh, I'll do this later, my mind does not know the difference between later 5 minutes, later next week, later next month. So my mind is going to be, my subconscious is going to constantly be trying to remember that I said I needed to do that. So when we have physical things in front of us, you know, when you talk about being organized, you know, people think, oh, it has to be a clean, perfect, clean desk, and that's not the case, but it does affect us greatly. Because when all that stuff are those piles, and people can have these neat little piles, and I love it when somebody says, I know what's in those piles. And I go, I do too. The new stuff's on the top and the old's on the bottom, right? But when we have that in front of us, it is mentally draining us. It's mentally taking energy from us. So if you're a piler and you have that all in front of you, move it. Put it behind you. Put it on the floor. And there really is better places than those 2 also. But if that's what you need, then you put it there, but don't have it in front of you. Okay? Only have those things on your desk that give you energy, that make you feel good, that you use all the time. The other stuff, it can be handy and close by, but it really is important just to have the things you need. So what this also affects is, so if I only have the project I'm working on my desk, when I get that interruption, I get that phone call, I get my daughter coming in and said, what are you doing for lunch today? You know, I can then come back to what I was working on. It's much easier. But if I have 3 or 4 projects, which at times I do, I'm like everybody else, then I wind up going into another direction. You know, my mind's probably tired of that one. Oh yeah, I forgot I need to work on this, and then I get sidetracked. But when you only have that one project on your desk, it's so much easier to come back and be refocused. So there are some physics of clutter. The first is clutter comes into our life with little or no assistance on your part. Everybody want to agree with that? Any agreement? Okay. Rule number 2 is it won't leave without some assistance on your part. Okay? We have to move it back out. It comes in, but we have to move it out. And third is clutter unattended becomes invisible. But not, I mean, that should say to its owner, but not to others. Yeah, because it says not to own. It should be saying not to others up there. I need to fix that. So the owner of it doesn't see it because it's like anything else. We start laying things on a cabinet. Before you know, it's piled more and more, and until it's kind of fallen off, do we ever want to do anything with it? So, but other people see it. So when we are in the professional world, it really can make an impression on us professionally, even though it really doesn't determine who we are or what we are or how we work or whatever, but it does give an impression. So the myth of getting organized is I don't have time to get organized. I probably hear that one more than any. And what I can say is we don't have time not to. You know, and the time that you spend the time to organize, the time that you reap back is 100-fold. You know, if you can find something when you need it, it's worth something. But if you can't find it when you need it, it's lost its value. So being able to find something in just a matter of seconds or a matter of minutes is huge. To have a place for something when you're going to put something away. That's the whole reason for clutter more than anything, is we have not determined a home for whatever it is and then taken the time to put it there. So when we bring all this new stuff into our lives, if it's the garage, the closet, the desk, wherever, the kitchen, we bring all this new stuff in, and if we haven't made room for it, it starts getting piled and starts taking over. So it's really important to, you know, make sure you take the time to get organized, and you will reap the benefits a lot. So start with small projects, small steps. Don't look at your garage as a project, because it's not, okay? I mean, it is maybe a project in your mind, but you want to break it down to maybe that shelving, maybe that corner, maybe that, you know, box. You just want to empty that one box. But when we, you know, take the time to break it down, we can walk away and feel good about what we got done, just like I was talking about at the end of the day, versus all that we didn't get done. Because when we're looking like a big room like a garage, that's craziness. And for some people, to even think that they can accomplish that in a day, you know, to reap help, that helps. 5 minutes a day winds up equaling 30 hours a year. So just by taking 5 minutes at the end of every day to pick things up and put it away, we have saved ourselves a lot of time. Delegate what you're not good at. You know, if you got filing to do, children around, they can help. You know, get people other recruited. If you do have a job and you do have people working for you, delegate what you're not good at. Find somebody else to do it. Hire it out. But we can spend so much time spinning our wheels trying to do something that we either hate doing or are not good at, when somebody else can do it that's good at that. That's their profession, or that they enjoy doing it in just a small amount of time, where it's taken us a large lot of time. Recruiting help is huge, especially if you're going to do an organizing project at a home. Get more than either bring a friend along or get family members. It's better if you can get family members, because if they're part of the cleanup, then they're more willing to keep it that way. Work from a game plan. You know, if you're going to, you know, do the garage on Saturday, have a game plan. What do you really want to accomplish? You want to accomplish that corner, that shelving in it? What do you want to accomplish? Know what that is, and then understand the benefits you're going to reap from it. The other one is I was born to be unorganized. Anybody feel that way? You know, there are people who think, you know, have asked me, you know, is this something that we're, you know, is there a gene or something out there for those people who are organized? And I will say that people who are right-brained or left-brained, there is a difference. But it is a skill that can be learned. It just has to become a priority to you. And there are a lot of different ways to organize. What works for one person does not always work for somebody else. So it's the same thing with time management and being efficient in what we do. What works for one does not always work for someone else. So we have to find what works naturally for us, and that's really the key, because we can only do things for a long period of time. You know, we can only sustain it if it works naturally for us. So it's a false belief anybody can learn. Creative people do have more of a problem trying to roll that in because they're off to the next shiny thing. Okay, here it goes. So they really have to set up a system and a process that will work for them because they are about that time span. So telling somebody who's really got, has a little bit of ADHD or is very creative and is off to that shiny thing, for them to sit down and work for 90 minutes is probably never going to happen. They're going to be off to 5 different things. So that has to be built into your schedule. So it is about finding out what works for you. Ask the hard question and be true to yourself. Is this even important? If it's not important, why take the time to do it? But if you can change your mindset and realize how important it can be effectively for you, then maybe it's worth the time and the effort. Having a system again. So if you're going to clean out, say, a closet. Saturday morning, have you ever been here? Saturday morning, going to clean out the garage or the closet. I'll say a closet. And okay, I'm all ready. I'm going to do it this Saturday. I'm going to do it. I get up. I'm ready. I start pulling things out. Oh, this goes down in the garage. I go down in the garage, and my husband says, oh, Kathy, will you help me do this? And so then I'm off doing that. Next thing, the phone rings, and then I'm answering the phone, and then the kids want lunch, and then, and then at the end of the day, I've not got much done. Anybody been there? Yeah. So it really is about having a system. So if you are going to do an organizing project, your desk, garage, closet, whatever, set some timelines and have yourself some boxes and don't leave the room, okay, until it's break time. So have a box for things that go somewhere else in the house. Have your phone turned off for that hour or 2 hours that you're going to work. Set yourself up for success. But you'll find that, you can accomplish something and feel good about it, and then you're going to want to do more. But when it's really frustrating for us because we don't get anything done, then it's really hard. So it's about having some boxes, having one for the stuff that gets, donated, sold, goes to somebody else, something goes somewhere else in the house, and then the stuff that needs to go back to wherever, on the shelf or in the closet. Trial and error, again, it's about naturally what works for you to keep it that way. Has anybody ever heard this? Handle a piece of paper just once? Well, that's only good for toilet tissue and paper towels and Kleenex. Okay? But what you can do with it is you can make a decision the first time you handle it. Okay? So there are some things that we can just discard. We get the junk mail, we get things that really don't affect us. We can throw them away. We can discard or shred them. Next, can we delegate it? Can't discard it, but can we delegate it to someone else? I have a client that I was working with, and once we were starting to even just look at her email, and she goes, oh, well, that goes to Susan, that goes to Susan, that goes to Susan. So why are you getting all Susan's email? Well, I used to do that job, but I no longer do it. So she was taking the time to forward all this email to Susan instead of taking the time to say, hey, start sending these to Susan. So if it's supposed to be delegated, that's the first thing we want to try and do if we can. Do it. 2 minutes or less, just do it. Doesn't need anything else to happen. Just do it. Defer for filing. Okay, we can't discard it, can't delegate it to somebody else, takes more than 2 minutes, but it just needs to be filed. So that can go either on a filing pile or it can, and I would suggest you file everything at one, in sections versus one at a time. And then the last is define for action. So as your mail comes in, if you make those decisions, you're going to end up with those things that need action on them. And so we need to know when we're going to work on it, how long is it going to take, and does it need to go on my calendar? We've already kind of talked about the calendar thing. Okay? So discard. Does everybody understand that one? Funny to say that that's the hardest for a lot of us. A lot of us, discarding is the hardest thing. But what if? Yes, sir.
Discard used to be simple. Like, I have my office in my house.
papers need to be thrown away. But now you can't really throw them away because they have your information on them, so you have to shred them. And your house is not set up to shred paper, so you have to buy a shredder. And the shredder burns up because it's a piece of junk, you have to buy another one. Then your wife wants to decide to give all the shredded paper to the, Humane Society for puppies. So now you have to take the staples out of the shredded paper, okay? And then you have to oil the jaws because they'll wear out after a while. So some of these things, like, they look real simple, but then they come back and they just destroy you. So right now I have 2 garbage cans full of paper in my basement and a shredder right beside it, and I'm just trying to build myself up to do it. So, just a comment, sorry.
That's okay. Well, thank you for sharing that, that is totally, true in some cases. And my suggestion is it's better if you can have that close by, so when you're opening the mail, it gets done and at that point in time, if that's feasible, but it's not always feasible. But if you're waiting till it's huge, then it's going to take more time. Yes?
I have maybe a possible solution for him. I have a museum of paper in my basement, which is really as large as the art museum. And my wife and I have been working on it, and what we do is just pile up boxes and boxes, and we found this great shredding company, load up the car, take it to the place, and you can watch them shred it for you, and that works really well so far.
And there's also people that will come
and it's free, by the way.
And yes, I know First Community Credit Union is doing a shredding thing in September. NAPO, National Professional Organizers, host one every, the first part of every year, but if you check with your bank, see if they're doing one, but there's also companies for minimum of 2 boxes, they'll come and shred everything you have right there on site. So thank you for suggesting that. But discard is really one of the hardest things for people to let go. What about if I need it? What if? Well, so I'm going to give you some questions to answer. So one is, and this is more along stuff versus paper, but do I love it? Does it make me feel good? Does it give me energy? If it does, keep it, but display it. Don't put it in a box somewhere. If you're going to keep it and it makes you feel good and you love it and you want to keep it, then keep it, but display it so that other people can share in it. Do I use it? Is it useful? Is it something we use on a regular basis? Is it recent enough to be useful? Especially articles and items like that, they're bigger and better tomorrow anyway. So really, is it useful enough to have to hang on to? Do I need it for tax or legal reasons? So if you've said no to all these, how hard would it be to get again? And if you're in a company and you're working, there's probably 10 other people who have the same thing. So let them keep it. You don't have to keep it. And then it comes down to the final last question. What's the worst thing that would happen if you don't have it? And if I gave the same thing to everybody here, one percentage would throw it away, the other percentage would keep it. So it's a personal thing. It's nothing that when I help somebody, I don't make them throw anything away. You have to want a personal reason to keep it. But I say, if you're going to keep it, know why you're keeping it, okay? Know why you're going to keep it and what you're going to do with it. Have a place for it. So why am I keeping it? And make sure it has a home. And then you can keep whatever you want. Now, I will tell you, those of you who are St. Louis, been here for a while, December 5th, 1982. 81? 82. My husband and I just been married a little over a year, and we lived 1.5 miles from the Merrimack River. And it was a Sunday, and for those, I'll tell my age and and the time, we can shop in St. Louis on Sundays at that period of time. So we had to go over to Illinois. So a friend of mine, we were going to go to Illinois that day and go Christmas shopping, and and she said, her husband, she had called that morning. She goes, my husband really doesn't want me to go. Some of the roads wind up getting, flooded around here, and we might not, get back in. And I said, okay, kind of disappointed. And later in that day, my husband had ran up to the quick shop for something, and he said, come back. He goes, I think we better leave. And I go, why? And he goes, well, the quick shop's kind of starting to back things up. And he said, we're probably not going to get out in the morning to go to work. So let's go to my mom's. That way we can go to work and we're not, stressed about, the roads being closed. And I said, okay. Go to work, go to my mother-in-law's, spend the night, go to work next day. I come home. I'm ready to go home. My husband said, I think you better sit down. I go, why? Just sit down. So I sat down. And we lived in a mobile home at the time, and it was 3/4 the way underwater. Okay. One of the few things that I was able to salvage out of that was my wedding album. A little muddy in spots, but I was able to salvage that. But that's probably about all I was able to salvage. A few other maybe minor things. But the reason why I'm telling you this, and I hadn't thought about this until a long time, and so I started working with a client about a year ago, and it brought this all back to me. But when I think about that event, did that event affect my life? Yes. And everybody would have to agree that something like that would affect your life. Both probably positively and negatively in different ways. But the stuff that I lost, I cannot tell you that there's one thing that I lost that negatively impacted my life because I didn't have it. Not one thing. And even though there was times they said, oh, whatever happened to whatever, and you kind of maybe be a little disappointed that you didn't have it. Oh, yeah, we lost it in the flood. But, nothing. So, and I only tell this story because, to realize that sometimes we put, our possessions in such a place and we really don't. Life is the most important part. And keeping our family safe and not having this stuff is really not that important. So sometimes, if you're really having a tough time, think about that. Hopefully I'll give you that story to think about. So delegating, if you're in a position to delegate, it really is something that if you're in that position, a manager, to make sure you're delegating those things that you're not good at, but also delegating to teach, delegating to help our children to learn, delegating to help other people to grow. And it's not about us giving up work, it's about helping other people to learn and to grow. Just do it. 2 minutes, like I said, 2 minutes or less. Nothing else has to happen. Just move on. Just do it. So need to just jot down a phone number or put it in your database somewhere, do it. But, so we've delegated, we've discarded, delegated, or just do it. The next one is file for reference. Just have a filing system, and it doesn't have to be paper. It can become, a paperless system. You can start filing on your computer, scanning it and filing it. That's another way of doing it. Most people think about filing, they think about paper. And then the next is your projects, and this is the most important, because if we've made those decisions as the stuff has come in, we're down to this. So when do I need to do it? Okay. How long is it going to take me? And like I said, and I kind of went over that a little bit fast last time, but it takes us 1.5 to 3 times longer than we anticipate. When we enjoy doing something, we can spend all day doing it, and then those things that we hate doing, we think it's going to take us much longer than it does. But really, kind of estimate how long it's going to take so that you can schedule that in. A lot of times we don't think of that. We just make a whole list. What's the next action, which I've talked about earlier? How important is that, knowing what's the next action that needs to happen? And then put it on the calendar if you need it. Okay? So we've discarded stuff. If it could be discarded, we've delegated it. We've done it. 2 seconds less, we filed it. What's left is what needs to have action to it. I use a Tickler file system. This is something that when I had staff, everybody in my office used. Has anybody used a Tickler system before? Tickler? Okay. 2? Okay. Can we get the microphones? Because I'd like to hear this. You want to raise your hands again so that she can come with the microphone? So I'd like to know if you used it, if you still use it, and then what you like about it.
Now, are you talking about a Tickler file like months of the year and days of the month? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually started that, oh my gosh, back in 1996 when I was working in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That's who got me that employer got me interested in the Tickle file and Franklin and Stephen Covey, and I've never been the same since. I'm finding myself very lost right now because I got a new job and took my entire Tickler file to work. And now I'm lost at home because it really helped me. Like if I didn't have to work on a piece of paper until a certain date, or I had a phone call that needed a piece of paper, like if that was reference for me, I would put it in that certain date in that certain month. So I wouldn't have to look at it again until I saw on my calendar the little Tickle file symbol that told me where exactly to go for that piece of paper when I needed it. And I'm finding myself really needing to do a new one for my home financial things and
Right.
all of the priorities I have at home. So I would definitely recommend it.
Thank you. And it is great for home because of kids, especially kids, and trying to keep track of all this stuff. And then there's someone else that used back in the back? Somebody else say that they used one? I did. Okay.
You didn't have to worry about it. It was out of sight, out of mind, and it was going to pop back up when it was due.
And that really is the great thing about it. It's hanging files, and you can get them accordion ways also. And if you're all electronic, you can create it electronically. But I use electronic and, as the lady said, and the physical together, so it will remind me. But it's a 1 through 31 hanging file, and a January through December. So when I was saying later, when do I need to work on this, I can then put that in that file. So one thing per piece of paper. I use all my scratch paper up, so every piece of paper goes back out of my house has been written on, the 2 sides have been used. So basically, if I'm going to work on that on Friday, I will stick it in my Friday folder. And then if something only has to be done once or twice a year or quarterly, I can put it in the month that it needs to be done on to remind me to work on it. It could be just a reminder. Don't forget that you need, first stage of whatever that you need to work on. One of my favorite, I have a few extra ones in the front. One is things that need to be paid, but my favorite is called Waiting for Response. I'm waiting for somebody else. I've done my part, but I can't do my next step without them. So that's something that I'll look at every day. Oh yeah, Jane has to call me about, I'm waiting for this so that I can finish it up. So it'll trigger. But for some people, you can eliminate a to-do list just by using a system like this. It's a way of getting things off the desk and into a system that will remind you when it's due. Now, you have to use it, or it won't remind you. For those people who are going to that might start using, I just say, put a little sticky note up. I'm not real big fan of sticky notes, but put one up, remember, and I call it the GO system, get organized. So it's just easy to say go. So, and for you, that would be a perfect word, right? So, I just, say, look at my go. So that's the first thing I do. And then at the end of the day, I'll take things out of whatever might be left in there from today that I didn't finish and tomorrow, and I will prioritize them. So I will spread it out on my desk, and I'll say, okay, this is the first thing I need to do tomorrow, and I will start laying them face down on top of each other. I'll put it back in tomorrow's file, and then tomorrow morning, I know the very first thing I need to work on. The neat thing about this kind of a system, when you have staff and they use it, and in my case, every staff member did not have a choice because it's what I taught, so they had to use it as well. But once they got used to it and got in the habit, they all loved it, and I'm being very honest there. But it was nice. If they were sick, I could go to their system, and I could pull out what they had planned that day. And I could say, this is really important. This has to happen today. The rest can wait. Or this, and distribute it. Yes?
Earlier you mentioned that one of the problems that people sometimes have is they attempt too much. And you commented, attempt too much, don't. As nice as this sounds, would you say that for certain file people or non-filing people that maybe we should try just to file at all and then kind of work up to this? Or is this a panacea? Because to me, this sounds great, you know, so I go to Amazon and $60 and da-da-da-da, and then I have a package in the corner that adds to the clutter.
Right, right. So, and I'll be very honest with you, when I first tried to implement this system, I tried, oh, this is too much, I can't do this, you know. So then I went to the days of the week, you know, and then I went to, one first week of the month, second week of the month, and I wound up coming back to this, and this has always worked best for me. What I do find, though, is people tend to, once again, put too much in tomorrow's pile that they can't get done. So then they keep on just moving these piles, and it starts becoming one big pile. And that's the downfall of it, is if you aren't thinking about it and making sure that you're thinking about your list and being really aware of how much time it's going to do, then it can get overwhelming with a list. But by putting it all together, I don't know that you're really accomplishing a whole lot. Yes?
Okay, I just have a question. I just want to clarify the system. So let's say we're in the month of what, August? Do you take what is out of August and then put it in the monthly date so that you do that,
okay,
you know, per the day?
So my up front will be my, I don't know if you, oh, I didn't mean to do that. So my first date would be, I would have August, where this says December, and I don't know if you can see that or not. And then the 23rd would be my file, and then it would go to September, okay? So if I knew I was going to do something in September, I would put it in September, and then when those rotated up, because I just kind of rotate them back so that the current one's always in front, then when I got to September, I would take whatever's in September and distribute it out through my 1 through 31. Is that what you were asking?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? You know, if you need some kind of a system, this system works for 90% of the people. I've had to adjust it and work it different ways for different people that I've worked with, but 90% of the people, this really is a good system. But once again, if you don't use it, it doesn't really work. Yes?
I'm one of those people that you talked about earlier, the creative type. And so my mind is in 12 places at one time, maybe more. And what you said a minute ago about remembering to look there. I mean, I make reminders on my Outlook, but I don't look at them. You know, for me, I mean, I make a list of home stuff that needs to be done and work stuff that needs to be done, and then try to just work from that list every day and pick a couple things and move forward. But how long did it take you to get comfortable with this list?
The first process just really, I kept on thinking, oh, I can make it better. You know, it was me and thinking it would. But really, if you use this for a couple weeks, it would become, you know, pretty much, you would see the benefit from it.
And do you merge family and home in one system?
Now that I have a home office, yes. You know, because it's all the same day. But if you have have one at home, it's great. You think you get an invitation for a birthday party, but you sure can't, for sure don't know if the kids can go yet. You can say, oh, I'll put it on Friday. We'll know by then. Then we can move it when we're gonna, go Saturday when we're gonna go shopping, buy the present, and then we can put the map and the invitation the day before. Or I like to put things the day before if it's an event. But then how many times have we gone to, okay, I got an event today, oh, it's tomorrow, but I don't remember where I got to go, I got to figure that out, what time does it start? It's all right there. So it really does help. Yes?
Where can we get some more information about doing this or setting up a particular
Setting up
file?
that file. If you email me, I will send you the information. I do have some cards, and I think on your little math test, it's got my information on it. So feel free to, anything today that you have more questions on, feel free. I'd love to help you in any way I can. Yes? Got another one here.
I'm sorry I'm talking so much. I guess I just had one comment. I think the reason I stopped using the Tickle file is because I had that massive to-do list, which basically created a massive pile of paper that, like you said, I was moving from one day to the next. So the way I came back to it, and what I would recommend for those of you that don't think you're, file capable yet, because I certainly sometimes think I'm not, is to just start with the pieces of paper in your pile that only has a certain date attached to it. That, okay, I need this for this particular phone call, then put it in that date, and actually make a note on your calendar. That's what I've started to do as I've gotten back into the Tickle file system. I don't use it absolutely every day, but the days that I do, then I make a note on my calendar, such and such, with a little T with a circle around it, so I know that there's a piece of paper that's attached to that task on that date that I know where to look in my Tickle file system.
Great, thank you.
That might help.
And another thing too is this is not a place to hold big files. You would just put a piece of paper in there, work on the budget, and the budget file somewhere else. So this is more of just a reminder to remind you to do things. Okay, so how do we go from this to this? 3 simple steps. And it's any organizing project, okay? First, we have to gather everything. We're going to do the garage. We're going to do the closet. We're going to take everything off that shelf in that garage. We're going to gather it all together. This is the scariest thing for some people when I walk into their office and I say, okay, let's gather it all together. They panic. And I'm going to move everything in one pile. But if you don't, you're going to constantly be this way. So you want a focus. Then you're going to filter and sort it. Kind of use those questions that we talked about. In this case, you might have a delegation pile because you're going to move that later, a filing pile, and then you're going to have your action stuff. So if we were doing a desk, closet, I would have, like I said earlier, I'd have a box for this that goes somewhere else in the house, a box for things being donated, being sold, and then a trash pile. And then action. So we're going to gather it all together. We're going to separate it into different piles, and then we're going to go to the action pile again. When, how long, and does it need to go on the calendar? But if you're working on a desk, a pile of paper, just take and make that decision. Make those decisions and put it where it needs to go. It's amazing how much that will do and how you'll feel when you get done with the process. And then prioritize the action pile, which I didn't put. Okay, email. We're going to go through this email pretty fast. So how many emails do you handle every day? Okay? Say an average of 75, and I know this is a couple years old, so I know it's way past that. I'm at probably at least 2 to 250 every day. But we're going to base this on 75, okay? 75 times 240 work days a year is 18,000 per year. What else do you do 18,000 times in a year? Breathe. I think somebody said that. That's it. If you think about it, we do nothing else. And to me, that's really sad. That at the end of our life, we're going to say, what did we do most in our life? And that's dealing with email. If we process email time, they say it takes 1 to 3 minutes. We're going to use 1.5 minutes. Use a little, but they say it takes from 1 to 3 minutes to process an email on an average. That's 27,000 minutes per year. Divided by 60, that's 450 hours per year. 8-hour work days, that's 56 work days spent on email every year. And that's just at 75. So if we send less, we receive less. Okay? For every 5 we send, we receive back 3. So if we send less, we're going to receive less. So you can decrease your email by 10%, just 7, based on that 75, 7 less emails per day. Handling email, practice those decisions. It's the same decisions as we did with paper, a little different terminology. You know, instead of delegating or forwarding, you know, we're going to file it, we're going to, you know, delete it. The exact same questions. Keep to the point. Try and be as plain and simple and keep to the point when you're sending emails. I'm a pretty to the point type of person, and when I get an email that's, I have to scroll down, I panic when I have to think I have to read that. The biggest problem is we don't read them. We scan them because we get so much. So the simpler and easier you can get to that point of what your email is, the more chance that somebody's going to respond to it and respond correctly and not need verification. So focus on what really matters. What point do you really want to get across when you're sending an email? So send those clear, short messages. Think about the receiver. What do you want them to do? What action do you want from them? What are you trying to give them? What's in it for them? You know, we're always thinking about us, but why are we sending it? Why are we interrupting their day? Is it that important? So you can use the subject line for a complete email. So I might confirm with somebody for lunch today, and I might just type confirm in there, lunch 1:30, and put EOM behind it, which stands for end of message. So I don't have to repeat in my subject and then in the body of my email, and they don't have to open the email. If they see that EOM from me, and most people who get that from me now know what that means, then they know they don't have to open it up. So end of EOM, end of message. A couple others that some corporations and some people will get in the habit of using is RNN for NRN for no response is necessary. NTR for no thanks required. RTMO for reply to me only. And reply to me only works really well for group and distribution lists because a lot of times you send it out to a group, but you don't need that whole group emailing everybody else. You just need the answer back to you. So what needs to happen? Think about in your subject line using the verb before, action needed, and then what it is. Delivery, I'm delivering you the PowerPoint that I said I would. I'm confirming what a lunch date. I'm sending you info on. So by telling that in the subject line, they know exactly what it is or what it's about so that they know what needs to happen or not happen with it. And then another one is request, if you're requesting something from somebody. Organizing your email box. Turn off notifications. Who still gets a notification that they have email? Anybody? Most, you know, I think I'm finally getting this out there, but if you still receive a notification or a little thing pops up and a little envelope or you get a little sound, make sure you turn that off. 30 to 40% of our brain power it takes to switch from one mental task to another. And even though you don't go look at that email, if you get interrupted, you're canceling that train of thought and have to restart over. So it's really important to turn those off. Create rules to automatically redirect your emails so that they'll go into folders instead of ending up in your inbox. I do that for my newsletters. So all my newsletters go into a file folder so that when I have time, I'll go look at them versus them ending up in my inbox. Change your send and receive to every 30 minutes instead of 5 minutes. Outlook is based on defaults to 5 minutes. That'll reduce your interruptions of 70% reduction of interruptions in a day based on that 70. Use colors to organize senders that send you stuff so that you can spot it right away. Don't use more than 4 colors. Otherwise, you're just creating a rainbow, and it really doesn't make any sense. Use file folders, use folders, and use subject folders. And the folder system that I used is called CAPS, C-A-P-P-S. And that stands for clients or customers, administrative, products. In my case, products or services, programs is mine, and then personal, and then S for support teams. So I only have those file folders that I know exactly. It deals with the client, so I can go into that folder, and then I have subfolders inside that. But when we have a string of folders this big, if you go back and look at all your folders, you probably have 2 or 3 that really have the same type of stuff in them that you can combine together, because we have different thoughts when we create those folders. So you need some kind of a system to put them in. Stop any email subscriptions that no longer affect you. No longer really we subscribe to things and they might not be important or relevant anymore. So unsubscribe to those. Limit your use to return receipt for other people, and change the subject line before you save it, because what we file and we're saving it for is a totally different, could be a totally, and most times, a different reason why we're saving it. So change the subject line, much easier to find when you go to look for it. So if you need more time, you can change something about yourself. You can change something about your environment, right? Or you can change something about someone else. And interesting enough, the third is the most used and the least effective. So it's really about what can we change about what we do, how we react, what we do, and our environment, versus thinking about what somebody else should do. You have the control, okay? Come back to what I said in the beginning. You have to control over your attitude, your time, money, and energy. And so what you do with that, you need to take responsibility for. But you do have the control. So, any takeaways from today? Hopefully you have come away with 1 or 2 things, and we have just a few minutes, so I'd like anybody who's willing to share with those. Is anybody willing to share? I need about 4 or 5 people to share. Okay, 1, 2, 3, somebody else. Somebody from this side of the room. Who's willing to share? Okay. And you'll be glad you did. Okay, so let's start.
Sweet. Okay. I'm going to go back to the tickler system. I actually do have one sitting on the floor in my office, but aren't very effective at using it. So I'm going to try to use that. And the other thing you were talking about with regards to the email folders and the string of them, I can so relate to that. And even last week I found some things in archives that I didn't want in archives, and it's like, how did that get there? Right. So those are 2 things that I think I'll do.
Great, thank you. And afterwards, you can come up to me. I have my books and some mouse pads available.
Thank you for your time. You had said earlier, each morning pick 3 things to accomplish that day. And that's the one thing that I really need to do, is just pick 3 things that I'm going to do in one day.
Great, thank you. And then this gentleman here.
For me, the most important thing was identifying the most important thing. Seems like an oversimplification, but it tends to then put everything else in perspective. I would offer a cost-saving tip to the gentleman in the red shirt. If you can come by old paper boxes of computer paper, they can often work as an interim file cabinet. They're wide enough to take Pendaflex folders, and they're not the most attractive, but they might get you started.
Right. And where's the gentleman now?
As far as what I'll do in the next 24 hours, I've got one of those piles on my desk that will disappear soon. And I've got several dozen folders in my email account that I just throw stuff. And that's sort of like, you know, the bookcase and where you throw things in your office. That's going to be gone through as well. I also have a question. The room I use as my home office also has other assorted and totally unrelated uses to it. Any thoughts on whether that's a good thing, bad thing, or otherwise?
Well, I would say it's not a good thing, but in some cases we don't have a choice. And in my case, my husband's clothes live in my office. You know, we have very small closets, and I have the big closet, and he has the little one. So, you know, the biggest thing, if you don't have an office, you need to create one in some corner somewhere. If you can have things handy to you that other people don't use, Scotch tape, all those tools, have them only for you. But if you can move those things out, it's much better, because then it's more of an office. When you go there, you know you're going there to work versus sitting and reading a book or doing other things. Yes? It's CAPS, C-A-P-P-S. So clients or customers, admin, everybody has admin stuff, products or programs in my case. The next is personal, so personal stuff, and the last is support group. So it might be a board I'm on, it might be a women's group that I'm part of. Like if I was part of this group, that would fall into that. So support teams, other things like that. Anybody else? Okay. Well, you all have a way to get a hold of me. Again, feel free. If I can help you in any way possible, I would love to do that. I do not want you to have any more email than you already have, but if productivity is an issue for you, I do send out Monday mornings a productivity tip of the week. You can go to my website and sign up. You can send me your email, but I will not put you on that list unless there's something that you want to get from me. And thank you for your time. I hope this was informative for you and that I've given you some value.